All right, buddy. How are you?
Good. Just still kicking.
I am trying to kick this cold. I was down for the week.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
It's a lingerer.
Yeah, let me tell you. I almost feel it was like COVID-like because of the fatigue that I had.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do anything. So we have reading, chapter 8 in Daniel for the men's group.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do any of that.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit behind. I got to make up for that. Doing anything for the podcast this week. I didn't want to do anything for that, but we have a great topic, and I'm thankful to everybody on Twitter who put in the hard work to make this episode possible. So it's just like fatigue and cough wasn't too bad. It's only, I only cough when I'm awake, thankfully, so I was able to sleep just fine, so lucky for that, but yeah.
Well, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm dealing with some fatigue this morning as well. I don't really know why, but I didn't cough at all last night because for those of you listening, I just came through this whole thing that Coach Lambie's dealing with, and but I woke up this morning like, have whatever, a little protein drink, a banana. Oh yeah, not today, Satan.
Not that day.
Not today.
Working on that. All right. Well, for all of the listeners who caught last week's episode with Tom Swales,
Yep.
if you haven't, go back and listen to that. A lot of good info in there. But Tom was gracious enough. He sent me an email, and he wanted to share a master class with all the listeners for absolutely free. 8 neuro hacks for rapid client results, how to reduce pain and get them moving faster and better in 60 seconds or less. This masterclass is packed with immediately actionable techniques for clinicians looking to enhance their practice. Your listeners can access it here, and I will provide the link in the show notes on these episodes. So go check that out. Free masterclass from Tom Swales. Pretty cool stuff.
Pretty gracious of him. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, man. Well,
thank you, Tom. Appreciate it, bro.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. We'll send him a big thank you.
Great episode.
Yeah. All right, man. So the topic for today. So number one, this isn't our topic, but just put it out there. I don't know if you saw it. So RFK Jr., head of HHS, Secretary of HHS, said that they're going to find the cause of the autism epidemic by September.
Yeah, he believes they can have it by September. Yes.
Yeah, I saw so that. A few presuppositions here that are pointed out by anybody on the internet who has a basic understanding of how science works. So number one, he's presupposing that there is a cause.
Right.
Number two, he's presupposing
there's an artificial cause. I think that's right. What he's looking at.
Yes. So he said we're going to determine what the causes are and reduce those exposures. So he has already predetermined that there are environmental exposures that cause autism. He's already predetermined that. Number two is already predetermined that this is a quote-unquote epidemic. Now, to my understanding, and to most everybody's understanding, like the reason that the prevalence in autism has gone up can be attributed basically to the changes in diagnostic criteria. So the first diagnostic criteria for autism, I think, came out in the DSM-3, and it was only a couple of things. In the DSM-4 or 5, I think, it was labeled a spectrum of disorders. So instead of just one or two things, there were a whole multiplicity of things. And that change alone would include a whole bunch of people who were not previously diagnosed with autism as now being fitting under the diagnosis of autism.
Right.
So, yeah, so a couple things like that. And then the other thing is, we can't just, this is not how science works. You don't just say, well, we're going to determine the cause of this by X date.
Yeah.
As a police officer, Dwayne, Did you ever come up like working with detectives or anything like that? Did they ever say, we're going to solve this case in 3 months? We're going to determine who did this crime in X amount of time.
Well, I've heard that, but it always came back to bite them in the butt. And similarly, I would hear things like, we have effectively eliminated crime in the such and such area.
Right.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Love you, bro, but no, you haven't. So, for the listeners out there, I'm not trying to cast shade on any department or um, especially law enforcement or even in medical community and scientific community. But the numbers and the statistics, reporting criteria, when that changes, and by the way, that could be manipulated as well. So yeah, you know what? If I lived in, say, Bonehead America, and I wanted to tell Bonehead America that I've eliminated crime in their neighborhood, there are ways to adjust statistics so it looks like you did that.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'm not saying it's lying or cheating, but if you have a bunch of crimes at the beginning of February, then in March, when you look back at February, if you want to make that look better, say instead of reporting from February 1 to February 28th, you would report from, say, February 10th to March 5th or something, and say there's no crimes in there. And you go, look what we did. Look what we did. I know that's a shocker for some people, and I'm not saying that you should distrust your police officers or the scientific community when they do the same things. But when in the older days, um, back when I was a kid, autism was a yes or no. It was a yes or
Right.
no
Yeah.
condition. But now we casually, well, I don't want to say casually because that means that we don't think it's important. But you speak of a spectrum. Oh, there's somewhere on the spectrum. Well, now you include so many more conditions, variables, behaviors. I think that's what Coach Lambie's trying to say is like when you
Right.
expand that spectrum, now you increase the number who come under that category of autism. Do people in the spectrum, do they have um, behavioral markers, traits? Yeah, but I think I don't think people realize that that encompasses a whole lot more people.
Yep.
Did
And
I explain that okay?
yeah, I think so.
I could even go there on ADHD, but don't get me started.
Yeah. So it's yeah, not trying to throw shade at anybody. I hope that Secretary Kennedy can do the best job that he can.
Yep.
Um, However, this whole thing with autism, it seems like he has predetermined what it is that he wants to find.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that he has, told some people, I want to show that autism is caused by these environmental factors, and you have 5 months to provide me that evidence. That's what that seems to me. So, on the topic of fudging data, Dwayne, you remember sometime last year we talked about the lean mass hyper responder study?
Oh
It's
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so these guys on keto and they're
Yes.
lean and they're quote
Yes.
unquote healthy, otherwise metabolically healthy. They just have high LDL.
Yeah.
And let me share my screen here. The entire screen. And they were comparing, so they had some initial baseline measurements of these guys who had been on a ketogenic diet for just about 5 years. They all had a really low BMI. BMI is like 22. That's a skinny person. And Their HbA1c is fantastic. Their triglycerides are fantastic. HDL looks good, right? They're healthy people. They exercise. Nobody smokes. They just have high LDL, right? Sky high LDL. And the theory was by these people, Dave Feldman, and mainly Dave Feldman, he's the one who came up with this term, lean mass hyperresponder, is that these individuals, despite having high LDL, aren't really subject to the same atherosclerotic progression that someone with diabetes or someone with familial hypercholesterolemia, that's where you genetically have high LDL, high cholesterol,
Uh-huh.
that they wouldn't be susceptible because they're otherwise metabolically healthy.
Right.
And so they started this keto trial, this lean mass hyperresponder trial, and the initial baseline results. This was the one that came out. I think we showed it. So the primary author here is Matthew Budoff, and he's the guy performing all the CCTA. I forget what that stands for. Here it is: coronary computed tomography angiography. He's the one doing all of that, and he's been involved in other stuff. But they compared the baseline results of these. I think there was about 80 people in the keto cohort, and they found another cohort that was happening at the same time called the Miami Heart cohort, and they found about 80 people where they could compare baseline results, and they showed that the people in the keto group didn't really have more plaque in their arteries compared to the Miami Heart, and it was about the similar. And so at the time, I had pointed out, like, well, these people on the Miami Heart group have higher BMI. Some of them were on lipid lowering therapy, which means they had high cholesterol before. Some
Uh-huh.
of them were on other medications, right? So comparing the two, they were just looking at certain blood markers, and they did the best they could to find, equivalent individuals that they could compare. But the Miami cohort was overweight, eating a standard American diet. And so at the time I said, this isn't the slam dunk that they think it is, because you're saying these people who are supposed to be ultra uber elite healthy individuals on a ketogenic diet,
Uh-huh.
well, they don't have any more progression of plaque than these overweight people who are eating a standard American diet on medications. And like, that's not the slam dunk that you think it is, right?
Uh-huh.
You're saying that being uber healthy and having an ideal BMI and these ideal metrics of health, but if you have sky high LDL on a ketogenic diet, that means you are developing plaque at the same rate as the people you're saying are unhealthy eating a standard American diet, and these are the things that are causing the coronary heart disease and stuff, right?
Right.
Like, you're saying the two are equivalent.
Right.
So it wouldn't be beneficial to lose a bunch of weight and reduce your triglycerides and reduce your HbA1c and have sky high LDL. There's no benefit there in terms of cardiovascular disease risk, right?
Right.
Well, those were the baseline results. The 1 year, because this was a 1 year follow-up, so they basically took baseline results, let these people go for 1 year, and then measured, they did the angiogram again at 1 year, and took blood markers and stuff. And then throughout the trial, it looks like they were taking blood measurements to make sure that these guys were actually adhering to a ketogenic diet. And so what did they report here, Dwayne? They
Uh,
reported
Go ahead. I was hoping
they
you
re-
wasn't going to ask me to read that because it's too small.
no. They reported
Plaque
that,
begets
well,
plaque.
yeah, so the progression of plaque that they ended up finding, so there was progression of plaque in this keto trial, and it's not a trial. So in these lean mass hyperresponders, they did have progression of plaque. And so what they found was, well, that progression of plaque wasn't correlated with high LDL or ApoB, apolipoprotein B, would be the protein that we're actually concerned with that causes the problem of atherosclerotic disease. ApoB. Well, we didn't find any association between the increase in plaque and ApoB or LDL or saturated fat intake. But what they did find was that it associated with baseline plaque scores. So if you had a CAC score, so coronary artery calcium score, over 100 at baseline, then that meant that your progression was a little bit more than somebody who was under 100. Interesting stuff here, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Yep.
problem is, Dwayne, the problem is, in the pre-registration of this trial, the main outcome, the primary outcome, was to find the percent change in total non-calcified coronary plaque volume. So when they pre-registered this trial and they said, this is what our trial is, these are who the participants are going to be, this is how we're going to recruit them, and these are the things that we're going to look for. The only outcome that they said they were going to look for is the percent change in total non-calcified coronary plaque volume. So the idea behind this was they had the hypothesis that being a lean mass hyperresponder, so having this, that's defined as having high LDL, high HDL, but low triglycerides, and being otherwise metabolically unhealthy, would somehow be protective against increased plaque volume, right? Because the way we understand it is that LDL cholesterol, ApoB specifically, is the thing that kind of drives increase
Yes.
plaque progression or the
Yes.
development of plaque at all. And
Yes.
so the thought was, well, we think that having these specific markers somehow is protective against that, and you wouldn't necessarily see an increase in plaque progression. And so they said, we're going to take 100 people who fit this description, who are eating a ketogenic diet, and we're going to measure their plaque at baseline. We're going to measure their plaque at 1 year, and we're going to see if they actually develop plaque at an increased rate. Guess what, Dwayne? They did not report that
Nope.
in this study.
Nope.
So they came out with these associations, which is not what the primary outcome was. Now, like I said, I was down for the week and I didn't have a chance. I saw this all coming out at the beginning of the week and I wanted to review it. I wanted to look through the study. I just didn't have it in me to do it. And thank you to everyone on Twitter who did all the hard work of finding this. I was able to find a little thing that other people didn't find, but it fits in with other things that other people found. So Mike here, Mike Albert, this is everybody is really going after these guys. So literature consistently shows that failure to report pre-registered primary outcomes is often associated with selective outcome reporting, which tends
Well
to
said.
favor positive or statistically significant results, suggesting a potential for manipulative data practices. And at the bottom of this, he goes on to list a whole bunch of references that point that. And so there, everybody's pointing out the problems with this trial. And there are a lot. And so the people who did this, so you have Adrian Sotomoda, Nick Norowitz, Dave Feldman, and this, of course, is being promoted by everybody on a carnivore or ketogenic diet as saying, oh, look and see, they have been lying. ApoB or LDL actually isn't associated with plaque progression at all. Okay, so the limitation with that in this trial is that everyone in this cohort had sky-high LDL. Now, we saw this in the 7-country study when it came to smoking.
Yeah,
So
I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, one of the big arguments against the 7-country study is, well, Ansel Keys just disregarded the information on smoking. And as we went through that, Ansel Keys showed we couldn't find a significant signal here because everybody smoked. There just wasn't enough variation in smoking to detect a signal. So when you have a cohort here where everyone has sky-high ApoB and everyone is eating sky-high amounts of saturated fat, of course you're not going to find an association between those two things in the progression of plaque because there isn't enough variation there to
Right.
find an
Right.
association.
Right.
So it's
Right.
kind of so what the results that they're reporting out of this is kind of like, well, duh. Like this is not, no one's surprised by that. No one's
Yeah.
surprised by that at all. Okay. And so a lot of people, so Spencer Nadolsky particularly, and then you had Mike on there, and a couple other people were really, pestering these guys, going, hey, where is the primary outcome? You guys haven't reported it. And they tried to suggest that this chart right here somehow showed the primary outcome, which it didn't. There's no way to extrapolate from this exactly how much of a change there was. We see the line goes up a little bit, but there's no way to determine here. This isn't the reporting of the primary outcome, and they didn't discuss this in the text at all whatsoever. So what they did do, however, is they buried all of this information in the supplementary data, knowing full well most people are not going to go into the supplementary data. And so a lot of people had to. And so what we see here over on the left is they had the Keto CTA trial, which was 100 people, these lean mass hyper responders. And then we have the baseline. PAV stands for percent atheroma value. Now, again, this is not the primary outcome that they suggested that they were going to look at when they pre-registered the trial. Not percent atheroma value. So they had baseline here, and then they had the delta percent atheroma value, which is the change in percent over the course of 1 year. Okay. And so we have some results here. And then what they did is they compared that to other previous studies with cohorts that report the same outcomes. Okay. This percent atheroma value. Now, what they tried to say is, well, look, compared to these other guys, the whole group, we see a change of 0.8% for the whole group. And if we compare that to some of these others, it's not any worse than any of those. Okay, again, here's the problem. So just like in the Miami cohort, where the people in the Miami cohort are overweight, they're eating a standard American diet, they're on lipid-lowering therapies, right? And they're on some other medications and stuff. All of these cohorts that they have listed here down below that they're comparing them to, these are cohorts where there's a high prevalence of hypertension and diabetes and smoking and obesity. So what they're saying is, well, see, our elite group of special healthy people didn't have any worse change in the percent of atheroma volume compared to these people who have hypertension, diabetes, and smoke. Like, are you kidding me? How is this?
Wow.
And then they break it down here. So we have Keto CTA. They have CAC at baseline of 0, and those guys had a 0.5% change. We had 10-year CVD risk over 5%. They had a 1.4. And CAC at baseline over 100, which was 2.4. Now, if we can look and see here, in the keto group, if you had a 10-year CVD risk over 5%, they had a percent change in PAV of 1.4%. That is higher than any of the other trials they listed. That is significantly higher.
Yep.
Right? And if you had a CAC of over 100 at baseline in the keto, this is incredible. Okay, so Dr. Allo, he reported on Twitter that this is the highest recorded percent of change that he's seen in the literature. Now, he says a lot of stuff that is a hyperbolic, so whether or not that's true, I don't know. But from what people have been digging up online and saying, well, look at these other trials and then what they have compared to here, this is the highest recorded percent change from what we've seen available. So this looks to me like actually being a lean mass hyper responder on a ketogenic diet seems to be quite dangerous, putting you at a higher risk of increased atherosclerotic disease.
Well, as the everyday man ombudsman, I would just like to say that it's common sense. Just think about it. Just think about it. Being on the keto, and eating a hyper saturated fat diet, what does that tell you? That's not rocket science. A-
Yeah.
Am I saying that right? I know I am, but it's like that's not rocket science.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be
So,
a surprise.
yeah. Now, everybody was out there badgering these guys. Hey, what is the primary outcome that you guys found? It's not reported. You guys didn't provide that number. This was the primary outcome in the pre-registration. What is it? So they finally came and reported the absolute number. Remember, they meant to report the percent change. They didn't provide anything, any kind of numbers for the primary outcome in the pre-registration. They finally had to tweet out the actual number here, and the change in non-calcified plaque volume was 18.8 millimeters cubed. Now, I had no idea what this meant at the time. As more information started coming out over the week, we started to figure out, okay, they had an interquintile range of 37.3, interquartile range of 37.3 millimeters cubed over 1 year. So the average or the mean change in the total non-calcified plaque volume for the whole group together was 18.8. So let's just call it 19 millimeters cubed. Now, comparing this to a consensus document, which is Shaw et al., and I did find that somewhere, but I don't know where it is here. So non-diabetic patients, so that's the average person on a standard American diet. Non-diabetic patients on average, or the median, seems to be 2.5 millimeters cubed per year. 2.5 compared to
Eight.
19,
Yeah,
Dwayne.
yeah. That's crazy.
Now, if you're diabetic, the median plaque volume is 31.2. Now, it seems to me that the results from this keto trial are closer as far as the median change in non-calcified plaque volume is closer to people who have diabetes than just an overweight person who's otherwise healthy eating a standard American diet.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So there's another guy who goes by, I think it's Earthling. So he dug up this study right here, coronary plaque volume and predictors of fast plaque progression as assessed by CCTA, a single center observational study. Now this is a single center, right? So a single place within the United States where they do CCTA. People come in who are obviously having heart issues, or right, there's some reason that we need to look at your arteries with CCTA, a single center, and they looked at, I think it was 350 people. And when we look at the results that they found in this study, 42 patients joined. So these are just normal people coming in off the street to a single center. There's about 350 of them. 42 patients out of about 350 showed fast plaque progression of total plaque volume. Now, fast plaque progression was defined as greater than 1.3 millimeters cube increase of total plaque volume per month. Well, if we take 1.3 per month and we times that by 12 months, because that was the course of the keto trial, you get 15.6.
15, yeah.
So by this metric, okay, they have fast plaque progression in this keto trial. The
Yep.
whole group.
Yep.
The median of the whole group. Now, going back to the thing that I was able to find, so I did look into, I said, okay, so they're trying to suggest that, well, if we take the whole group, the median for the whole group, it was kind of, plaque progression was fairly stable. And again, people are asking, hey, is 18.8 considered stable? The answer to that is no.
No.
But they're trying to suggest that, they're not really seeing a more change than these other, data that we have. And again, you're comparing these who are supposed to be the elite healthy people on a ketogenic diet compared to diabetic people with hypertension who smoke. It's not the slam dunk that you think it is. Now, I
Yeah.
looked into, so for the whole keto trial, the change in percent atheroma volume was 0.8%. And we have one other trial in here, the Van Rosendahl et al., which had the same change. And this is the paradigm cohort. So I went into that and I looked at that trial because they provided that as a reference. And guess what? Matthew J. Budoff was involved in this trial too, in that one that they're comparing the keto trial to. And what did they find in here? I want to highlight this. So the increase in percent atheroma volume per year of 1% was selected based on its prognostic significance with MACE, MACE, that's major atherosclerotic cardiac events, in prior CT and intravascular ultrasound literature. So 1% of PAV per year change is significant because it suggests an increased risk of major atherosclerotic cardiac events. Coming back to this, Dwayne,
Yeah, look at
so for
that.
the whole group, they're almost there.
Yeah. Yep, yep,
Almost there. Now, if
yep.
we look at the individuals who have a 10-year CVD risk greater than 5%, and those who had a CAC at baseline of greater than 100%,
Right.
both of those subgroups fit this. They're at increased
Absolutely.
risk of MACE.
Yep.
Now, how many people out of the trial is that? 45. Dwayne, that's almost half.
Yep. Yep.
Almost half of this group is at an increased risk of major atherosclerotic cardiac events. They have fast plaque progression as defined by the literature and consensus statements that we have, right?
Right.
Now, they're trying to spin this somehow as to make up their own definitions. But before this trial started, when they were doing the pre-registration, when they were coming out with the ideas of this, everybody can go back in time. It's all recorded. It's on the internet. They said that they hypothesized that if you were a lean mass hyperresponder, which means you were otherwise metabolically healthy and you exercise and yada, 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 and you're lean, you just had high LDL, you would not be at higher risk of having a major atherosclerotic cardiac event or progression of atherosclerosis compared to otherwise normal healthy people on a standard American diet by the current metrics and the current understanding of how that works, not by some made up definition. By the current standards, they said we don't think that we're going to see progression by the current standards. That did not show true on this trial. So this trial shows that if you have high LDL and you are a lean mass, quote unquote, lean mass hyperresponder, you are on a ketogenic diet, you are at an increased risk of having a major atherosclerotic cardiac event.
So on the backside of this, it sounds like, first of all, it's there. It just, to me, it fits what's, let me stammer for just a second. So, hey, everybody, let's do a ketogenic diet. It's great for you. And I don't think that that's going to point to that outcome. As well as, have you ever heard of people who are really super athletic and they work out and, and they're on that keto diet and boom, they have a heart attack and people go, wow, well, they were so healthy. You were so healthy.
Yeah,
I think that's where the rubber hits the road. I mean, the data that we're reading the data there, and it's like in real life, it's like, well, yeah, everybody, oh, I can lose so much weight on keto, and I'm eating keto, and I know people that man, they live and breathe
live and
ketogenic
breathe
diet.
keto. Yep,
Oh, it's
yep.
keto,
And
it's keto, keto. And
yeah,
these
and
are
the
not
idea,
hyper super
right.
lean mass people. They're just normal folks. and they're living and dying. Well, I don't want to say that. They're living and breathing the ketogenic diet. And then when somebody is doing that, or even if they are healthy, and I see people running the roads all the time and they look great, but they're on those ketogenic diets, and then they have a heart attack. It's like, what happened? Oh, I don't know, can't tell.
Yeah. And
Hey,
it's they
we've effectively eliminated crime, and in
right.
Bodok,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
Yep.
It's like,
Yep.
it's
And
not
that's
true.
the big deal. That's the big deal with this paper is the switch and bait, right?
Yeah.
So we think that this special group of people are not going to have fast plaque progression
Yeah.
that we would expect from having high LDL because they're otherwise metabolically healthy. They don't have these other risk factors like diabetes and being obese and hypertension. So we think that they're somehow protected. And so we're going to look into this and we're going to measure the amount of change. And then what did they actually report? Well, we didn't find any association between this thing and that thing. So there's I don't want to call it a bait and switch, but it seems particularly as everyone has pointed out, intellectually dishonest.
Yeah.
These people are lying to you. And then a few days after they reported this, and people are still going through this thing, interpreting the results. What does this mean? What does that mean? Turns out they've decided they're going to set up their own clinic where you can have your blood measures, your blood markers drawn, and have them read by these people who have a different understanding of what all of this means. Which the funny part about that is well, if your paper says that plaque begets plaque and it's not necessarily these other markers that we see in blood, why are you doing blood labs?
Money, 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 money.
Exactly. Yeah.
One other thing I want to point out as well is we're looking at those numbers, and like if it says point 0.8, but if you look at the range of that's basically an average, and then it gives you the
That
range
was
of people. Like
that was
one
the
is at point
median.
0.3,
Yeah.
but one's at like, I don't remember what it was, like 2.7, or there,
Incredibly high. Yeah.
there's a range of people in there that are not
Yeah.
doing well.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah. So the keto trial does not show if you have
no,
high LDL and you're eating ketogenic diet, you don't need to worry about it. It absolutely does show. So even if you were to grant that, like let's just grant that you're a lean mass hyperresponder, which by the way, not almost no one is going to fit the definition of a lean mass
super
hyperresponder.
small person
When they were
portion.
doing the trial, they had such a hard time finding people who actually fit that definition.
Yeah,
There were tons of people who thought that they did, and they had to be turned away because they did not fit that definition. So almost no one fits this definition. But if you do, it seems to me that even if ApoB and LDL isn't the thing that's causing the advanced plaque progression, just being a lean mass hyperresponder on a ketogenic diet puts you at greater risk. So it doesn't seem to be that this is somehow protected. It actually seems to be that if we're going to say, hey, this is a genetic trait, a genetic thing, you lost the genetic lottery.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah. All right. So that's the
So
keto trial. It does not show that a ketogenic diet is beneficial for you. It does not show that being a lean mass hyperresponder is protective of atherosclerosis. It does not show the things that everyone out there is showing, and it does not show zero progression. I saw that as well. I think it was our friend Metabolic Mike there. I saw it come up on my YouTube feed. Shows zero plaque progression. No, my friend,
yeah,
no, it does not.
no,
It actually shows fast
yeah,
plaque progression
yeah, yeah,
as defined by the current understanding within the literature.
yeah, yeah.
So
People,
there you have it.
people,
Those
people just eat normal. Eat normal. Eat healthy. Exercise.
eat some fruits, eat some vegetables, get some
Just
fiber. You want to eat some meat, fine.
and
You
exercise a
want
little
to
bit.
yeah, you want to cook in a pan of butter, cook in a pan of butter. All that's fine. Um, don't try to pretend that adding saturated fat and these animal foods to your diet is somehow beneficial and protective. And that's the other thing doing. we were going to end it, but they're putting it out here as this is what our ancestors did and they were healthy, blah, blah, blah. And it's been pointed out by everyone and their mom. These people, you talk about ancestors, they lived until they were 45, and everybody wants to go, oh, well, the infant and child mortality numbers affect those rates. Yeah, that looks even worse for you because you're looking at an extremely biased sample.
Yeah.
Who would survive dying from an infant. So these would be the genetically elite of the population who would live the longest, and they still didn't live that long.
Yeah, absolutely. 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 Our life expectancy today is far greater than it was in 1945.
Absolutely. I had somebody tell me the other way. I mentioned something and somebody was like, oh, why did our grandparents' generation live into their 90s? What on earth are you talking about? There is no generation, except if you want to, there are certain periods of time like the Spanish flu or maybe World War II or something like that, where the previous generation had a greater life expectancy than the one coming after it. There are exceptions to it. But barring those exceptions, there's no generation in the past that lived longer than the generation that came after them. It is a straight line up. Life expectancy has gone up. Child and infant mortality has gone down. And that is due to our advancements in scientific understanding. And we understand that consuming less saturated fat, consuming more fruits and vegetables and whole grains is the thing that leads to a longer life and less complications from cardiovascular disease.
Absolutely.
Sorry, that's a bullet that I had to bite at a point in my life too.
Yep. Absolutely. But my grandma lived to 95.
My grandma lived to 95, yeah. And
okay.
You know what? And those same people smoked a pack of cigarettes a day and drank whiskey every day. And you know what I mean? Yeah.
Ultra rare. That's not the norm. That's not the norm. And people over the last 50 years, I mean, there's a greater life expectancy than the previous 50 years. So it's just, I don't know. I don't know what people are trying. I don't know what they want. There's no shortcut.
Well, we want justification to do the bad things that we're doing.
Yeah, that's it.
People want to eat steak and butter. I don't blame you. It's delicious.
It is.
Look, I have hypertension and I smoke these cigars. I understand. I get it. But I'm not going to sit here and try and pretend that smoking this cigar is somehow healthy because, well, in the past we used to smoke more tobacco and the men didn't have diabetes. I'm not going to pretend that. Just bite the bullet.
In the Lambert Ulrich study et al., we can prove that.
Well, no. Dwayne, if we exclude all the people who died. All right, that's it. Off my soapbox. I hope you guys got something from this. Hope some minds were blown.
It was excellent.
See you next time. Coach Lambie and Dwayne out.